From the time that they pronounced me dead was a good 45 minutes.
They cut my clothes and then they paddled my heart, 'cause my heart had stopped. And I could see people screaming and crying, but I didn't realise that was actually my physical body because I was somewhere else.
The only thing that I could feel, if you could imagine, absolute love and peace. There wasn't anything else to be felt.
I was greeted by people I'd known in the past.
I'm back home again.
Incredibly safe and felt at home.
Hey, welcome back to Round Trip Death, everybody, and our interview that we were having with Greg H. Mann. And for those that didn't hear the first part, I recommend go listen to that first. It's in-depth. There's a lot to it. But just to give a quick summary on where we were, Greg, please feel free to chime in and clarify anything if I'm off a little bit. But quite a few years ago, you had an experience where, well, it was an overdose. It was a suicide attempt. We'll just say what it was. And you took hundreds of pills. It's amazing that you were able to come back from it, that you were saved, shall we say, by the medical staff and by other miracles that happened. But it left some effects, right? I mean, you had heart problems after that. And I'm just jumping ahead to a while later. You are with your brother and a friend on the river. You are off alone on a great big rock, and your heart stops, and you have this amazing experience with a guide and with God. And I just want to jump in and ask you some questions about it so we can learn even more. I know I skipped a lot, but are we okay to that point?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, just to correct a few things, when you said the medical staff kind of saved me in the hospital, they didn't. They just said it was a miracle that I survived. There's almost nothing that they did. I mean, they gave me some activated charcoal, monitor a few things, but everything else was very accurate. Just for the sake of accuracy, I always try to be as accurate as possible with everything that I'm saying in regards to this stuff.
And you're absolutely right. And you had said that previously, but the fact is you were in the hospital. Okay.
Yeah.
Fast forward. Let's talk about some of the things that you experienced when you were on the rock, on the river. And one of the things that you started with was talking about this being, this personage, guide, if you will. And you felt like this was a female being. What else can you tell me about her? And I'm going to use her because you thought sort of female.
Yeah, people always question that a lot, actually, when they're like, why do you say he? Why do you say she? And the simple answer is it just, the energy and the vibe was just extremely female. It reminds me a lot of like Mother Nature or Mother Earth. We don't call her Father Earth or Father Nature. And there's just a female aspect to it. And then God, on the other hand, again, no sex. Neither one of them really technically had a sex. God or the Father or whatever you'd want to really call him, very male, very, very strong presence and of a male type of energy. Very much like the law is the law. It felt a lot like that.
So from this first being, did you feel like there was some sort of connection? Some people feel like a guardian angel type of connection, or some kind of a guide, or someone that you had known and loved in the past. Did you feel any of that?
I didn't feel any of that at all. I think for me, one of the really big parts about my journey, which obviously literally started when I was a child, so that's why it's been such a strange, long journey. Ever since it started, and the main culminating point was the pain, the suffering that I was feeling. Originally not a physical suffering either. It was just like, not even just, you could call it emotional, but it was almost like a spiritual suffering. In fact, one of the examples, I didn't even give this example. When I was in my youth and this was all happening, the world to me, I don't know if you can imagine this or remember this, but if you've ever had a nightmare where you're in this nightmare and, whether you're trying to run and you can't, or whatever it is that's happening that feels so terrible. I don't know if you've ever awoken from a nightmare and you're clearly awake, but you kind of still feel that energy of the nightmare. You still kind of feel afraid somehow. And, you're looking around, and my life felt like that all the time. So from the moment I was little, so I remember I made words for all these things. I call it the Pio Pio world. And the reason I called it Pio Pio world was because You know, in beautiful mornings, you hear like little birds going pew, pew, you know, like beautiful sounds that they're making. When I was in the place that I was in as a child, it sounded like the birds were yelling at me. They're like, pia, pia, you know, just, it felt like everything was like a nightmare. And I was living with that, which is part of the reason I think it was driving me insane. Obviously led to me, you know, being very sad, unhappy, having a lot of pain and suffering, and then obviously wanting to, you know, end my life. So my big goal, and this just to answer your question, was I was always looking for happiness, but not the way that everybody looks for happiness. I wasn't looking for a new toy or new clothes or, you know, something to fill that void. I wanted to find the thing that would fill, quote unquote, my soul or my heart, or something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And I tried religion, obviously, and I grew up Catholic, and I tried different Christian denominational churches. I tried Buddhism. I read, you know, spiritual books. I was trying to find something, and that led to a lot of frustration because nothing was working. And I would pray, and I would be very sincere in my prayers, and I would get baptized, and I would do all these things, but the emptiness just didn't go away. And so looking for happiness all this time, when I encountered this being of light, you might call her an angel, you can call her any name you want, really. She was just absolute light. I didn't necessarily act like I recognized her or that she felt like she was a family member or ancestor or someone I knew. The very first thing that came straight out of my heart was, I want to be like you. It was everything, Eric, that I'd been looking for virtually my entire life. She had the presence, the aura, the joy, the calmness, the peace, the love, the depth of her love, the depth of her compassion. It was unlike any human I've ever met. There's no human at this point after encountering this being. I can admire humans for certain things, but there's not really anybody that I could really say, wow, I want to be like them. There's nobody at this point because she was such a high standard. And like I said, I just wanted to be like her. That I knew at that moment, without even thinking about it, that was everything I was looking for. I was literally just happy with that. Having that encounter in that moment was so big, so pivotal. Obviously, it shocked me a lot when she responded, when I said, I want to be like you. And she said, you are me and I am you. And I was just like, that's not true. Look at me, and you could see all my flaws. And, it's funny now that I think about it. Her light was a lot like similar to the light of God, because God's light is like very interesting. His light shines right through you, right onto your soul. It exposes everything. And hers was kind of similar in the sense that I could see all my flaws very clearly. I mean, it penetrated right through me, which made it very easy for me to call her out on it and say, look at me. I'm not like you. Look at you. You are so glorious. You are so beautiful. And I just wanted that so badly because I didn't have it all my life. And it was absolutely beautiful. I'm envious, and I hope that for humanity someday, because I know that someday it will happen. And we are so flawed, but the beauty that we can be, the potential is unimaginable.
It's amazing that you got so much from her in such a short amount of time. In other words, my understanding, my feeling from what happened is you two didn't sit and have this big, long conversation, and that's how that you knew that she was full of love. Tell me, was she just radiating this? Did you just felt this from her? Is that how it worked?
Eric, that's a very good question, because I finally figured out kind of how to word it. Because I thought it too. I thought, how could I feel the patience? How could I feel the compassion? How could I feel the love? I didn't understand. And what I realized in time, her light, that was her clothing, by the way. So it's not that she had clothes on. Her light was her clothes. The only thing that you could see was kind of her face a little bit, but not much. It was the aura. It was but her clothing dictated what she was. And to give you an example, it's like if you go to a hospital and there's a guy wearing a white coat, you're like, oh, he must be a doctor. Or if you see a woman with a white coat, she must be a doctor. If you go to, mechanic shop and this guy's wearing the mechanic outfit and he's got all the grease, like whatever, if you're a policeman and you wear the police outfit, whatever you're wearing dictates kind of who you are, right? If you're a judge, you wear the black robe, whatever. I could go on and on. And in this particular place, when you're on the other side, it's interesting, because I would even ask you, because I saw a lot of this there. Do you think there's a hierarchy in heaven?
Yes.
And you would absolutely be correct, because a lot of people would say, well, probably not everybody's equal. That's not what I was shown. I was shown, and the reason we know there's a hierarchy is just think about what the scripture says when it talks about Lucifer. He was the highest of the angels, right? That right there lets you know there is a hierarchy. But the hierarchy in heaven is very different than the one on earth. And over there, what rises you up in the hierarchy is your love. How much love do you have in your heart? And it's all exposed. There is no lying. There is no hiding. There's no speaking with a silver tongue or whatever they call it. It's very clear who rises up. And you only rise up for all the right reasons. And so her clothing was her patience, was her compassion, was the depth of her love. And because it was her clothing, I was just knew it somehow, but I didn't think about it. It was all very instinctual. I could just feel it off of her. And that's just how I knew it. We wear our clothing that it comes from our heart, basically, on the other side.
Beautiful. After that, you talked about traveling at a really high rate of speed, which I'm sure you couldn't even put into numbers or anything. It sounded like through the galaxy, and you talked about stars being doorways. Could you expound on that a little bit more?
So basically, I realized through direct experience that stars are portals or doors. This is a little, I don't know how much detail I should go into this, but from a child again, I've opened some portals. So there's different types of portals. And one of them is stars. The human body can actually be a portal, by the way, or quote unquote a doorway, and so can water. So ultimately, in this particular case, from what I could see, the stars are doors. Some people call them gates, like star gates, and they're doors to navigate the stars. So you literally are jumping to stars at a very, very fast speed. I never understood this whole star constellation thing, like, oh, there's the Big Dipper and there's Orion's belt. I was never into it. I never understood it. And so I kind of always looked up there and thought, that doesn't look like a dipper to me. And then somebody would draw it for you. And I'm like, who comes up with this stuff? Like, I just didn't understand. But seeing how we are to navigate the heavens and that the stars have a huge part of it, it kind of helps me understand why we create star constellations and how to navigate the heavens. Because if I would have not had that being of light, it's impossible. You cannot navigate the stars. Try to go into downtown LA or try to drive anywhere without your GPS or a map and any signs that even point you in the right direction. And this is a billion times, maybe probably more into the trillions of times more difficult. It is so vast and the speeds are so high, and it just would have been impossible. And I knew that when I was traveling with her. I'm just like, I let go. I'm like, you take me wherever you're taking me and I'm with you. But I knew very clearly that I would be absolutely lost. And I knew that I actually thought I'd never come back. I thought that was pretty much it.
And she knew where she was going. And you ended up at this place where you described a council. Tell me more about the council. Did they look like people or angels? How many were there? Give me an idea of what that was like.
All right. So remember, before I say this, I'm just going to give an honest testimonial because I don't have a religion or a belief system. But when I arrived, they were like monks. So the first being seems more like an angel, which almost seems more biblical in nature, right? Now it's like monks, and which is more quote unquote from Asia or maybe Buddhism or whatnot. Their robes that they were wearing were kind of like orange in color. And like I said, they were in a circle. Now, you know what's really crazy, Eric? This is so funny because I was in Japan recently. I've been doing a lot of research in Japan, and I was grocery shopping. I was buying some organic produce, and I look over and I see this giant like mural or painting or whatever it is. And when I look at it, Eric, it was exactly what I saw when I was on the other side. And I couldn't believe that I just saw it. And when I saw that, I immediately tried to find a Japanese person and said, do you know who drew this? Because there is no way, it's absolutely, in my opinion, impossible that you would draw this if you've never been there. You've had to have been where I had been. It's just not possible. And so I asked them who drew that or where that came from, and then they kind of laughed a little bit, and the Japanese person told me, well, that's Kukai. And I'm like, Kukai? Who's Kukai? I've never even heard the name Kukai. And he's like, you don't know Kukai? And basically Kukai is like the Japanese Jesus, basically. And I thought it was so strange, so I started reading about him, and oh my goodness, Kukai's story is unbelievable and beautiful. He's obviously dead, but what he did was something so unprecedented. He self-mummified himself. So he changed his diet to clear out all these bacteria and parasites out of his body so that he could go into deep meditation and his body wouldn't decompose, if you can believe that. The body is still in Japan. It still exists to this day. The monks still bring him food, by the way. It's such an interesting story and so smart. And it's one of the reasons that Japan is the way they are today. It's because of Kukai, as far as how peaceful they are, how clean they are. They live so long because they practice certain practices that have wisdom in them for health. All these different things that the Japanese do, they really are pretty amazing people. Nobody's perfect, but my goodness, they're pretty remarkable people. And I found a lot and learned a lot from them that's amazing. So I looked up this Kukai thing because they have the monks in a circle, same way. But at the center, and this is where I think symbolism needs to be understood in order to understand what the image means, they have a really big head that looks like the Buddha. Now, the word Buddha really is kind of the same word as the word Christ, that when you reach the awakening and the enlightenment. So it's funny that they put Buddha's head because it symbolizes God, right? The Christ, the God. And what's interesting about that is all those monks in a circle opened the portal that I went through where I met God. So it was so odd, this finding that there's things that I've been finding throughout the years to kind of make sense of this. And so I don't know if that really answers your question, but when I arrived at the council, as I said before, they said, we've been waiting for you. They spoke with one voice. They gave me a ton of images. A lot of information came in a very, very short period of time, and it was pretty wild.
Did you feel like you were being judged in any way by them?
No, not at all. In fact, with them, what I felt was God has a plan, and there's a certain will, when they say we want to do God's will, he has a plan. And when I got there, when they said we've been waiting for you, it had to do with a greater and grander plan that God has that has been going on, by the way, for thousands of years. This is not a short plan. This is a very long one. When they said they've been waiting for me, it had to do with trying to finish basically almost finish this particular plan that he's had for so long. As a child, part of my pain, as I explained before, was that I just had I don't even know how to explain it. I know that a lot of people say the same thing too, that they just have this love for God. And I just had this strange love and almost connection. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, because I was going to Catholic church in my, obviously very, very little. And I remember asking a question, and I asked this specifically to my mother. I don't know why I'll always remember this embedded in my brain. I kept going to church all the time with my parents, and I'm thinking, when do we finally meet God? And I kept asking my mom, I'm like, when do we meet God? Like, we come here all the time. The preacher keeps talking, or the pastor, whatever. All this stuff happens, and they drink the they drink the wine and eat the cookie or the bread or whatever. And all this is happening. And every single time it's the same thing. And I started noticing that it was a repetition all the time. And of course, I get bored. I'm a kid. I'm like, and when do we meet this guy? Like, where is this God? I asked her something about God, actually. I don't remember the question, but I asked her something about God or when we're going to meet him or something. And my mother's response was just something that she had memorized as a Catholic also in her youth. And she just kind of regurgitated something, and it meant nothing to me. But it was the first time that I felt like because I believed everything my parents said. My father or my mother, they tell me anything and I believed it. That was the way that I was. I highly respect them. But deep down inside was the first time that it's almost like I heard a little voice as she said it that said, she doesn't know. It was then that I realized nobody really knows. These preachers or pastors or people think that they understand the depths or the true nature, all these questions that I had. After that, I always felt like the happiness and joy that I was seeking, I just kind of knew instinctively deep down in my heart that it had everything to do with God, and that nobody was going to be able to lead me there. And I tried. That's why I went to many churches and tried many different things. And I was like the canary in the coal mine. You couldn't fool me. It was either going to work or it wasn't. It was either going to be real or it wasn't. I'm not into being affected by psychosomatic things. In fact, and placebos, those don't tend to really work very well on me. because I tend to just let everything go. And if the truth's going to hit, the truth's going to hit. And so I don't really know if that answers your question, but yeah, those monks were not there to judge me. They were actually waiting for me, as they said, and they're waiting for me to do something. I do have a lot of ideas of what that is, but but the simple fact is they were definitely not judging me. Typically, the real judgment, for people who wonder this, the real judgment ends up actually coming from ourselves. So the truth is actually in us already. It's in us already. And so when God shines his light and you see the great mirror, that I call it the great mirror, because you are able to peer into your own soul. Again, I think the best example was, you can't really look at your own eyes unless you look in a mirror. But if you don't have a mirror, and so that's where your soul's very similar. You can't seem to see it. You need a mirror to see it. And God is that ultimate mirror. And once you see it, you know somehow deep down inside the truth. Like when scripture says the truth is what will set you free. You know the truth. So when you've done something wrong, you just know it. You just feel it. You just know. Nobody needs to tell you. There's no need for people judging each other. That being a light that I encountered, I pointed out to her all my flaws. Not one judgment came off.
All right. This is probably my biggest discussion point that I want to have here. You described God as being heavy-handed, a male figure, and heavy-handed, which has negative connotations with it. It sounds kind of like anger and like it's my way or the highway kind of thing. But we've also discussed love and the hierarchy of heaven based on how much love one has. So explain how those two things go together for us.
Yeah, and when I say heavy-handed, I don't mean like he's going to hit you type of thing. It's just that he's so big, and when I say he's big, it's kind of like the waves of an ocean. You could have a person walking and a wave will just knock you down, and it's not that it's trying to, it's the nature. And it seems from what I can see, God has what I call, and I never understood it really before, and I'd read it in scripture before or heard it. And I understand it very well now because it was revealed in the depths of my soul, which is the law. There is a law and there's God's law. And God's law, it's the only way to be able to, quote unquote, what we would call ascend or find our way back to him or find our way back to what one might call the tree of life. But the law is a law. And there's an image. I really hope this guy hears, and he probably won't, but there's a guy, if you ever heard his name, I think it's Robert Edward Grant. I don't know if you've heard of this guy. A lot of things he's really right about. And then he's missing a few important pieces, which are important to finish the whole image. It's like a few pieces to a puzzle. And basically, the way that the real tree of life looks, I don't know if you know what the tree of life truly looks like, and they've tricked us with this. The tree of life is a tree, depending on certain images, but it's three things. So it's a tree, and then what looks either like a sword or a staff, and then two snakes going around, the staff. They tricked us in some ways because that's the image they use for hospitals. So if you've ever noticed the staff, the serpent, and then at the top they have what looks also like a disc or the sun. But the disc can also represent a mirror. Remember I told you God is like the great mirror, but it's also a type of light. So kind of like the sun. And that represents life. And it represents more than life because the serpents represent, there's supposed to be two, and they actually represent male and female. They represent humans. The humans are the snakes. And the staff, which can also be depicted as a sword, is a sword of truth. And that's why in scripture, when it talks about the return of God or Jesus, it says that a sword will be coming out of his mouth. And that's because the truth will come out. That sort of truth is how the snakes ascend. That's how they go upwards and ascend once again and reach God again, who is the tree of life. So the whole thing is an image of life. And it's ironic that they put it in front of a hospital because they're letting you know subconsciously, we are in control of your life. They want to be the tree of life. They want to be the gods, but they're not. But they want to be. It's a weird cosmic thing that's been going on for a very long time. When I talk about, quote unquote, the Almighty, he's very big, but he can also be gentle. I was laid inside of him the way that you would lay in a river because that's the way he moves, and he's so big, and he looks like stars and plasma and water and these colors and all these different things. But he didn't feel mean. But the greater your evil is, like if you've done a lot of terrible things in your life, It's like pulling on a rubber band even more and more and more and more and more, because when you let go of it, it's only going to hit you that much harder. So it's not so much that he's punishing you or that he has this heavy hand, but it's more like the more you do, it's kind of like the karma thing. You know, the bigger it is or the more that you do of it, the harder it's going to hit you later. I don't know if that's really answering your question.
Yeah, what did his love feel like?
You know, it's so different. That's the weird part. I would have guessed that the being of light would have been more like God, her level of compassion and love. He was more like, geez, it's like an eternal flow of, dare I say, just brilliant information. Nothing but answers, nothing but light. It's like a tree, like, you know, a tree, like especially a giant sequoia tree. So it's so big, it's so strong, so steady, but it's not necessarily like a puppy rubbing up against you and so loving in that way. It's just, it's so it's foundational. But sometimes when he decides to move, it's very interesting because he really is unpredictable and like the wind. I think I shared with you when I was with my brother and quote unquote, I reached down and grabbed him, but it wasn't me. He moved through me very spontaneously and very fast. It was just like boom, like didn't almost have, dare I say, almost control, but he gave me control. So I could have at any moment stopped it, but I was just allowing it. And it's kind of hard to describe because it's this endless flow of like water, like a river, but then he can just do something at any moment that he wants to. And you don't know what he's going to do. Completely unpredictable. I think it almost reminds me of a verse where Jesus says, I don't think people understand this one. And this one actually, just a few days ago, came to me. I had to sit down and start writing and stop thinking because he wanted me to just write. And I was like, okay, here we go. And the things he showed me it was ironic because it was about one of the verses in scripture again, which is odd because I'm not, no offense to anybody, but I'm not Christian. I'm not even religious. I don't have any denomination because I don't want to close myself off. I feel like God's too big for that. I just don't want to do that. I never want to close off to any set of beliefs. So I just try to be open, but he tends to bring me to the Bible a lot lately. There's a verse where Jesus spoke to Nicodemus. I don't know if you remember the verse. It basically said, you know, Jesus was telling Nicodemus, you got to be born again. It's ironic because what Nicodemus was asking technically, I mean, he was saying, you know, I could even quote it. He says, we know you are a man of God, for no man could do such things if God were not with him. He basically is kind of asking him, you know, like, how do you do it? What's the way? What's the answer? A little ironic, you know, Jesus didn't say, well, you got to go give the church 10%, make sure to go there every Sunday and accept me as your Lord and Savior. You know, he didn't really say those things. He said, you must be born again. Now, I don't honestly think that a lot of people even understand what that means. I know that a lot of people think they do, but I don't think they do. Because Jesus goes on to say, it's not just about being born again. Jesus specifically starts going in, because Nicodemus doesn't understand. And he starts saying things like, well, you have to be born of water, but then you also have to be born of spirit. And then Nicodemus is a little confused. Obviously, at one point, he's like, I can't enter my mother's womb, you know, this whole thing. And then he starts talking about what is of the flesh is flesh, which, by the way, has a lot to do with water. But what is of the spirit is spirit, and that's where the spirit is born from. The spirit is born of God. You know, we are born of him. Obviously, he's our Father in heaven. When you're baptized in him, as I would call it, I don't think almost anybody's ever seen anything like that, at least for a long time. Because when I was with him, I think that's exactly what happened. I literally went into him. I was in him over there. But on earth, he was in me. So over there, I'm in him. Over here, he's in me. It's kind of odd, right? And I think I told you, it felt like I had two brains, which is really weird. I mean, if you could even imagine, I've never had anything like that ever. So that was kind of confusing at some point too. And so when Jesus is describing to Nicodemus about being born of the Spirit, he said something like, it's like the wind. He compares it to the wind too. He says, you know not where it comes from or where it goes. So are those who are born of the Spirit. What he's meaning by that, because I don't think people really understand what that means, but all I can say is that he's completely unpredictable. The wind sometimes goes here, goes there, and you don't know what he's going to do. But I know one thing's for sure. He knows way more than any human that's on the planet will ever know. He's so big. He's so massive. There's so much beautiful wisdom that we can't even begin to fathom. That if we just had one speck of it, we would think it's the most amazing thing on earth. And he's got tons of it. Every nanosecond, you can't imagine it. It's too much. I mean, there's so much more to, that I could go into detail, but I don't even know if that answers your question, but that's the best way that I can describe it.
I appreciate you using the term wisdom versus he's really smart or something like that. Wisdom is such a better term for that. I've got one other question, but before I forget, if you'll give me some contact info for you in case anybody wants to reach out, a website or whatever, we'll stick that in the show notes for everybody. And the last question that I'd like you to wrap up with is, this happened quite a few years ago. Greg, how has your life been different since this happened?
Wow, there's been a lot of changes. One of the biggest changes that started the whole domino effect of what I've been doing these days was when I was before him, and then when I kind of woke up a little bit and I came back to earth, and I mentioned to you that my brother had come over, and then we both were before him, so we got to actually be before him together. I'm trying to remember actually whether it was before my brother got there or after. I kind of think it was before he got there, but the point is that the first thing that was so impactful was I felt every doubt that I didn't even know I had. I felt it down into my bones. I felt it all go away. I no longer had any doubt, and I still have absolutely no doubt that God is real, that God exists, and he may not be like everybody thinks he is, because everybody's got their ideas of what they think God is like. And I can almost guarantee that if one was not prepared or told certain information, that if they were ever before him, they wouldn't recognize him. I think I pointed it out to you too. Jesus in this particular book, the Essene Gospel of Peace, was so interesting the way he worded it that I think I read it to you, but did I read the part where he kind of says a little bit about God, and at the very and you'd never have any idea what he's talking about. And then at the very end of the sentence, he says, "For this is God, if you did but know it." Because you wouldn't know. Unless somebody explained it to you, you're not going to know. And that was, and he describes it perfectly. When I say God is like water, I mean, just look at how Jesus describes him. He literally calls it the holy streams. So he's also describing him the same way as I saw him. That's why this book impacted me so much, because it's the only book I've ever seen that described God correctly. Obviously, I had direct experience, and I had a witness with me, and he marked my body, which was a whole other thing. This was very accurate, and I was very impressed by that. And you go look up this book and this author, and they're going to tell you he's a quack, that this is a bunch of garbage, it's a bunch of nonsense, and I probably would have believed that, being the skeptic that I am. But this was right, and I don't know how. Do not know how. And to me, he's clearly been there. That's what I can say. Jesus had been to these places, and he had been baptized in spirit and also water. And I don't think that was normal. I think that most people were just baptized in water. I think that's the norm for the majority of people. But to be baptized in the spirit is a whole other thing. I don't know how people could make that happen. It obviously sometimes brings me sadness, though I know it's coming. And by the way, the whole world's going to be baptized in spirit, just so you know. That is something that's going to be coming in the future. And I know people might think it's going to be the most pleasant thing. Ironically, it won't be at first. It's going to be painful, because everything's going to be revealed. And when I say everything, I'm talking about everything. Every wrong that anybody's ever done, every wrong that you've ever done, it will all be revealed in a second. It's going to be a very short period of time, and it's going to be extremely painful. Now, granted, when it's all said and done, you're going to feel really, really good. It's all going to change, and you'll find your Father and your connection once again. The face of the earth will change and transform if we can survive the tumultuous times that we are going through and that we're going to go through. Things are going to get pretty wild. And some people say, like, oh, don't be such a negative person or a doomsday person. I'm not saying that, because in the end, I will tell you that in the end, Eric, it's always going to work out at the end. There's no other way. It's already like written in the stars that in the end, everything's going to work out, and we will be okay. But, you go through growing pains, kind of like when a woman's giving birth. It's painful, and you're going through all this, and the baby finally comes out, and there's a relief. And it's so beautiful. And in the end, it's going to be a very beautiful thing.
All right. Hey, I appreciate you coming back for round 2 today, where I could shoot all these questions at you. Greg, hey, just thanks for all the info. Thanks again for listening and sharing this podcast. Don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button and sign up for our newsletter at roundtripdeath.com. If you want to share your near-death experience, or if you have questions or comments about the show, send an email to eric@roundtripdeath.com. Until then, I wish you everything good that you're looking for in this life and the next.